Hello, friends. We're doing a little exploration today. People have been very excited about using Claude with Cursor, and especially Cursor Composer. It's a very powerful multi-file editing tool. People have had some basic IDE integrations with AI to be able to write code, but Composer sort of adds an extra level of being able to look at multiple files and also enact changes. It can create files, save files, browse your folders, and so forth. For this little demo, I was exploring working with trying to build a simple full stack application as a personal KPI tracker to keep track of some things like a weekly exercise. And we're going to be walking through this at 10 times speed. So I did this video, worked on it for like an hour to see what was possible. We'll walk through and I'll explain what Cursor Composer is actually doing here, how we're approaching problems to solve, and at the end I'll recap with a couple of things I've learned about what you can and can't do with Cursor Composer. So here we go. With this, I pre-scaffolded a SQLite backend. We're going to be using a Node backend with SQLite, and that's helpful because that way I can deploy this to a server and have it run a simple database without having to do something more complicated for database hosting. And the first thing we're doing here is we're adding authentication so that not anybody can access the API and change the data. And so we can see then we combined all of the API calls into one file so that everything lives in one place and we can centralize that and be posting the headers in a consistent manner. And we're refactoring that nicely. And then we're just going to be using we're not going to build a full login system. There's lots of ways to do that with Auth0 or Clerk or NextAuth. There's a lot of Superbase. But right now, this is a small indie hacker tool, so I didn't want to use any fancy auth systems. So we'll just have it be easily to configure which user I am. And now we're going to set up toast notifications. So if there's an error, then we're able to display that error in the user interface, easily see what's happening. And then we ran into an issue with cores. That's often a thing. If you don't configure your backend server to work with cores, then the backend front-end communication can be a problem. So setting up the cores in this. As you can see in this workflow, I'm alternating between using just the ordinary Command K flow to work in a single file, and then the Composer flow if I want to have it look at or work on multiple files. What we're running into here is the schema is out of date. I added a new column into the schema, so I'm adding a utility function to be able to recreate the database, which for SQLite, it's pretty useful. You can just throw away your whole database and rebuild it very easily. It doesn't require complex migrations the way you probably would need to for a more evolved production system. One thing that I wish I'd done for this video is have the cursor and the web page side by side. I'll probably do that for future explorations because it can be jarring, especially at 10x speed, to be swapping between the two. Being able to see both at the same time is probably more useful for a screen presentation thing, even though normally I work fastest as a developer by having a single screen and switching between my windows. Partially because of the layouts for web pages. It's nice to be able to use a full desktop style area, unless I'm working on mobile, in which case it's a whole different, mobile first is a different paradigm for the way you do your layouts and designs for web apps. Yeah, so you can see this is evolving. On that left side, we got that nav bar with the two utilities at the bottom and then the three key features. So the purpose of this is I want to be able to create custom KPIs that will be tracked and then also submit events for things that occurred, which will then be tracked against those KPIs. In a future video, we'll look at building out a little dashboard with this so we can see the time buckets. You can see your current KPIs for the week, month, quarter, or even year. And then with this one, the date range. So one fun thing that's challenging in front-end development is making sure that you localize the date range correctly to the client time zones. Servers are best at storing things in raw UTC time, but actual users want things queried local to where they are, where they're based, and so you've always got to do that time zone offsetting when you're doing queries to ensure that you get the full day or week or quarter and that those time divisions are correct. And unfortunately, the base JavaScript date class doesn't really support time zone functionality, so this is an enhancement we'll have to do in the future with an extra library to do that. But yeah, that was one of the first hurdles I ran into that Cursor, Composer, and Claude don't inherently know how to handle, and a lot of JavaScript developers have to spend a lot of work to correctly localize things for times. Yeah, so that's where we got with this. Let's see, we'll grab some freeze frames. So we have what we finished building in this flow was we built the ability to create and view the KPIs that we have, and the ability to record and view events. Those were all built out right here from the front end and back end both, and the dashboard is coming later. So here you can see, yeah, we got this nice thing. You can see all the KPIs that you've got for your current user. Each user can have their own KPIs, so they can track different things. We got the Add New KPI button to bring up the form to create a new type of KPI, and then we're able to record KPIs against those. So you can record an event here and view the events that you've got on the event viewer. That's what we built out in this one. It took about 50 minutes to build this. And yeah, there's a bit of directing. So some people, especially since OpenDevin demo came out, people are excited about the idea of fully replacing programmers with AI coding tools. And it's evolving, but it's not there yet. You've absolutely got to bring your own design sense into what are you building and how are you building it architecturally. With this, we've got the front end and the back end, so you've got to be thinking about how that integration works and know some of the quirks and inherent things that are necessary for that. Somebody without coding experience and full stack development experience isn't going to have as easy a time getting that to work, especially run into certain kinds of errors like the cores error that we fixed, setting up the auth headers and the flow for that. Another thing is, even though the Cursor Composer is very powerful for working with multiple files, there's also some perks in trying to centralize things into putting a bunch of things into one file so that you can more easily reference it, because even though they have Cursor Composer projects, it's not easy to specify exactly which files you want or just tell it to look at everything. That would be nice, and I'm sure they'll be probably working on something along those lines soon. But it's easiest even in Composer where you specifically will @tag a file when you're giving it a command and tell it which files you want. Like it will automatically, when you use the command Shift-I to bring up your Composer pane here, it will know the context of the file that you're in. So you can see right here, it pulled up app.jsx. But if I wanted to reference anything else for what I'm next instructing Composer to do in a multi-file way, it's not going to know which files to look at unless I specifically tag those two and say I want you to touch these files. Sometimes it'll make its own autonomously, but it doesn't necessarily know where to read from to think of the parts that it's going to need to reference to write the code correctly, especially with data schemas. From front end and back end, those data schemas have to be aligned, so being able to reference those was helpful. What it is really good at is making pretty good UI layouts. We're using Tailwind here, so it was able to pretty nicely set this up. Although I also ran into some troubles initializing Tailwind. It didn't get the configuration for that right the first time. It didn't create, and so one thing Cursor Composer does not do is it does not run your npm install. So you're going to have to not only have the package JSON with the packages you need, but you're going to have to install that yourself. And sometimes it won't follow all the documentation setup needed for something. So with Tailwind, I ran into some fun with setting up post CSS and getting that integrated, and Cursor wasn't able to help me with that, even though it tried to scaffold it. One learning that I have from this is it's best, rather than starting from absolute scratch, if you've got a code template that you can use that brings in some of the things that you want, that's going to make things a lot easier. And then also having a Cursor rules file that explains what technologies you want to use and what you don't want to use will help it to make the right kinds of decisions for syntax, library usage, and integration. Overall, though, it's nice to be able to start to delegate things to the Cursor Composer and AI pair programmer, and it's amazing how far it's come already. It's a leap forward to be able to have access to Composer where it can create files that didn't exist and also look at a blend of files when it's working on things, make multi-file edits. That's definitely an improvement over the single file workflows that have been possible for a couple of years now with GitHub Copilot and initial version of Cursor. So I think Cursor Composer is going to unlock the way towards being able to delegate more and more to the computer. But excited to see what you guys do with this, and hopefully this is exciting and inspiring for you guys. And also just kind of an honest boots on the ground look at how it all works.